the IWGP Heavyweight Championship in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We're going to be covering the beginning of the IWGP, before it was the IWGP, up into, I think 2009. I'll have to make a separate video from 2009 up till the present day of 2022. Forgive me ahead of time. I'm probably going to butcher a few of these names. Some of them are hard to pronounce, and sometimes I draw a blank if I'm thinking too much, and somebody's simple name I might just forget. So bear with me on that. I'll do the best I can to describe each champion, each title change, each title that they held, because there's different styles of the belt, and there was different belts that merged into the IWGP as well. But before we get into 1983 and the first IWGP tournament champion, New Japan Pro Wrestling formed in 1972. Antonio Inoki, his company, he was set out to establish a championship, and it wasn't just going to be called the New Japan Heavyweight Champion. They wanted legitimate champion and a legitimate champion belt with lineage behind it. So I'm not sure the politics behind it, but there was a match with Antonio Inoki versus Karl Gotch in 1972 for what's considered the real world heavyweight championship. And you can Google that, real world championship, wrestling championship. What it was the old AWA, American Wrestling Alliance, not to be confused with Vern Gagne's AWA. This was more of a catch wrestling style wrestling championship from the 60s. Karl Gotch was the champion. So Inoki went with that championship belt and brought it to Japan and had a match with their champion, which was Gotch, who was also a member of New Japan anyway. And it would be crowned the first world champion. Hello, Jimmy. Get out of here, bud. So Karl Gotch, 1972 versus Antonio Inoki to establish the first New Japan Pro Wrestling Championship. And Antonio Inoki beat Gotch for that belt. And you can see the style title, a very old looking style belt. The AWA, American Wrestling Alliance, or Real World Heavyweight Championship. This didn't last long. Very short time, Inoki was champion. Gotch had won the title back sometime after. And Karl Gotch was considered the first New Japan Pro Wrestling champion. And that title would become vacated. Inoki would go a different route, and he would then take on the NWF, the National Wrestling Federation, that was out of, I think, the Buffalo area in New York. The title was defended throughout New York. I think it went down as far as Detroit, Cleveland, the Pittsburgh area of Pennsylvania, some spots in New Jersey. They had several different champions of the NWF. The champion that would be facing Inoki for that title was Jimmy Powers. Jimmy Powers, and as you can see the style of the NWF belt. He's not on the cover of any magazines with that belt, but Powers would take the title in 1974 to Japan to wrestle Antonio Inoki for what would become the New Japan's World Heavyweight title. Here is the match, a magazine covering the match with Inoki and Powers. Here is a couple of ticket stubs I have from that night. As you can see, it's got Inoki and Powers on the cover with the belt on the front cover of the ticket. And Inoki would take that title from Jim Powers, and that would establish the NWF Heavyweight Championship belt in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And here is Inoki on the cover of the November 74 Wrestling Monthly magazine. He has the trophy and the title belt, and there's a lot of coverage in this magazine of that match. This is Inoki's first cover as NWF World Champion. There wasn't very many champions to take that belt, just a couple. First being Tiger Jeet Singh. This is a ticket stub from the night Inoki lost the title to Tiger Jeet Singh, who was an incredible heel in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He was extremely over. a complete wild man. If you YouTube a couple of his matches, and you'll see his ring entrances were classic. He would just have the crowd running. He would hold the belt for several months. One of the few to actually hold it. He would lose the title back to Inoki, and several years later, Inoki would still be wouldn't lose the title. He would be the champion of the NWF in New Japan until they had formed a partnership with the WWF. And Antonio Inoki had a couple of tag team matches with the WWF champion Backlund. These two would tour through Madison Square Garden, all through Japan as a tag team, and then eventually would turn on each other and have a match for the NWF versus the WWF championship. Antonio Inoki would win that match, and he would become the WWF and the NWF World Heavyweight Champion. The WWF does not mention this. It doesn't discuss anything with Inoki winning the title. Very, very little coverage. You had to search the deep back alleys of the magazines to find any coverage on this match. There was a couple magazines that covered it. I believe Wrestling Review covered it. I'd have to look. All the Japanese magazines, of course, covered it. And this is a cover of the Japanese magazine with Antonio with that belt. He would hold the belt for about a week. November 30th, 1979 is when he won the title. Clean pinfall, center of the ring. And the rematch would take place December 6th, 1979. It would go to a no contest DQ due to outside interference. So Inoki never lost the title back to Backlund. What had happened is Backlund came back to the Garden not as the world champion anymore. Inoki vacated the belt, and it was handed over. The president of the WWF came into the ring carrying the belt for a match, Bobby Duncombe versus Bob Backlund, and that was on December 17th. Here is a program of that event. The ring announcer does not announce Backlund as the world champion. When he wins the title, the ring announcer announces the new world champion, Bob Backlund. And but everything was pretty much swept under the rug. But if you look between the lines and you see these little things like him not having the belt, him not wearing it to the ring, him not announced by the ring announcer as the champion when they do the introductions, it tells you he lost the belt. For whatever reason, the WWF didn't cover the loss. They didn't acknowledge it, and it's pretty stupid. They should have covered it, and they should have, gave credit where credit was due. I believe still to this day, I really don't follow what the WWF does, and I believe they still don't recognize him as champion. This same night, we had Harley Race defending the NWA World title versus Dusty Rhodes at the Garden, and also Hulk Hogan's first match in the WWF, which was December 79. So there it is, a brief history on what happened with Inoki and Backlund and how he held both titles in a title versus title. Like it or you don't like it, Inoki was the champion. This is a fanzine, which was a popular fanzine at the time. They sold them around outside of the Garden. You can also mail away and have it sent to you. This also covers the match with Backlund losing the title to Inoki. You can find these, at conventions and stuff like that. Wrestling Wonders. There's several volumes of this out there from the 76 to 82. I think it ended around that time. It was a pretty good fanzine. It was done pretty well. It was better coverage than some of the magazines at the time. Inoki continued defending the NWF title at the Garden. Here he is on the cover of a Madison Square Garden program on December 29th, 1 year later, with the NWF belt. He would wear the NWF belt in the ring to the Garden. So that would continue on with the NWF, and he wouldn't lose that title again for a while. He would lose it to Stan Hansen, 82, I believe, but then again, he would take it back quickly. Reason I'm going through the NWF is it connects to the IWGP. Inoki, this was a program, actually doesn't belong in here. Inoki won the WWF Martial Arts Championship. Here he is on the cover, winning the martial arts title from the WWF. Actually, you know what? It does make sense because this belt also becomes part of the IWGP later on. I'll explain it as I go up because you'll see the great Muta with it and Ricky Choshu later on with the martial art title of the WWF. Okay, so now we're getting into the IWGP. Where are we now? 1983. I have to digress a little bit and go back to before the IWGP, there was a tournament held called the MSG Series. Madison Square Garden was the hot spot for professional wrestling in the world. Inoki seen that, he felt that electricity, he knew how important and how your matches are at the Garden. He wanted that same feeling, the same importance, the same energy in Japan. So he decided to make a tournament called the Madison Square Garden Tournament. The winner of the tournament would become the Madison Square Garden Tournament champion. Before IWGP, it was the MSG Tournament. He changes the name to the International Wrestling Grand Prix Heavyweight Wrestling Tournament. And this was a tournament that took place in Japan over several days, 1983. And it had wrestlers from Madison Square Garden, the WWF, and New Japan against each other, against all comers, a battle in a single elimination tournament to the final two. The final two would become the champion. The champion would get a belt. That belt was not a defended belt. It was just a trophy belt. So you won the trophy, you won the belt, you got a trophy belt. It wasn't something that you defended until the following year, okay? So IWGP, we have a tournament. Madison Square Garden is no longer a tournament. It's the IWGP. It's Madison Square Garden wrestlers from the WWF now competing against New Japan Pro Wrestling. The finalists of the 1983 IWGP were Antonio Inoki and Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan wasn't the WWF champion yet. He was still in and out of the EWA, making his way through into the WWF ranks, soon to be coming shortly. But Hulk Hogan would defeat Antonio Inoki, becoming the first IWGP heavyweight tournament champion. Some people say he was never the champion, and that's true. He was never the IWGP heavyweight champion as a defended title. He was the IWGP heavyweight tournament champion, and that champion, instead of getting a trophy, got a belt. So the debate goes back and forth, call it whatever you want. Hogan held the IWGP belt, trophy belt. The trophy belt winner did not have to compete in the tournament the following year. He would have to defend the title against the next year's tournament winner. So Hogan did not have to compete in the tournament in 84. Inoki makes it to the finals of that tournament in 84. And here is their match in the finals of the 84. And Antonio Inoki would win the IWGP tournament championship belt for the first time, beating Hulk Hogan. And here's his first cover with the IWGP belt. The following year, they decided to have a rubber match, and I have two ticket stubs. One, IWGP, it's the finals, Antonio Inoki versus Andre the Giant on 6/11/85, and here is this ticket stub to that night. And Antonio Inoki would win. He won the tournament against Andre the Giant. They decided to have a title versus title, WWF versus the IWGP on 6/13/85. Hulk Hogan, WWF champion, versus Antonio Inoki, the newly crowned IWGP heavyweight tournament champion. And here is the magazine announcing the match of the title versus title, IWGP, WWF, Inoki versus Hogan, and of course, Antonio Inoki wins that title. Here is Inoki on the cover with the belt after winning. Here's a match with him and Andre 2 nights before, and then here's a match with Hogan a few days later after winning the title. This is just another shot of Inoki getting crowned the belt at the end of the match on the cover of Weekly Pro. 1986 would be more of the same, another tournament. The WWF was no longer competing. Hulk Hogan moved on, and they had their own thing going on with WrestleMania, and Inoki would win the third tournament in 1986. 1987 is where things change. The winner of the IWGP tournament in 1987, it would be now a defended title all over the world against any comer at any time. So there's no longer a defended title once a year. He would be the champion, traveling and defending the title from 1987 on. This is just a match with Fujinami and Inoki, which was a classic battle between the two. If you've ever seen the match, you'd know exactly what I mean. It went to a 1 hour brutal battle. Inoki decided to, what happened? He broke his ankle and could not compete in the IWGP tournament in '88. He had to surrender the title. Here's a program to the finals, and this is a program of the event, and Fujinami would win that title, defeating Vader for the belt and becoming the second heavyweight champion, but really the third different title holder, if you wanted to get technical, if you count Hogan. So here's Fujinami with that belt. This is a cool shot, that a match most people had no idea about. At the time, the WCCW down in Texas, the Von Erichs company, declared their title a world title. They withdrew from the NWA, and they were on their own. They had a national television coverage. They were reaching more homes than the Crockett era of the NWA, and they declared their own champion, and that was Kerry Von Erich. This was Kerry's belt. They had an IWGP versus WCCW title versus title in Japan, and Fujinami would win that match, beating Kerry Von Erich, and would take that title. He would eventually drop the title back to Kerry. Kerry would lose it to Jerry Lawler, and the AWA saga starts from that side. But yes, this was the second title versus title for IWGP. They did it a lot. It's one of the things I loved about the IWGP is they defended it against other titles, and there was title changes too, which was great. I wish more companies did that. It would have been, some really interesting wrestling in the late '70s if they did that kind of stuff. Fujinami would lose the title to Van Vader. Vader would get his revenge from losing it in the '88 tournament, and Vader is calling out the NWA World Champion Ric Flair, wanting to take his title in a title versus title. That match would not happen. This is an extremely rare magazine with Vader on the cover with the belt. This is the only magazine that I've on the cover of the IWGP with the belt that I was ever able to find. Extremely hard. It's a shame this match didn't happen. It would take place in Starrcade later on, but it would have been cool if they had Vader and Flair at that time period. Vader would lose it to the Russian Sambo champion. He would become the first Russian and the only Russian, the IWGP title. And you notice here, Inoki was defending his WWF martial arts title on the same card. And that they changed the name of this to the Greatest 18. Very stupid name, I don't understand it. But it's the Greatest 18 heavyweight title. That eventually would get merged with the IWGP belt later on. Here, now, we don't have another unique champion. The title would change hands to Vader again, Fujinami again. It would go to Riki Choshu a couple of times. And so I wanted to show unique champions with the title. So rather than show repeats, Riki Choshu with the title. This is the only magazine I could find with him on a cover. I've been looking for years, can't find it. This is a commemorative IWGP souvenir magazine from the first 15 years, and it's got Choshu on the cover of it. And Choshu would drop it back to Fujinami once again. I believe he held that title 5 times. At the time, it was the most of anybody. Inoki, he would take Inoki's record of holding it the most. But it would set up the battle between NWA World Champion Ric Flair versus Tatsumi Fujinami at the Tokyo Dome at Starrcade. And the match that didn't take place with Vader happened with Fujinami. And Fujinami would pin Ric Flair and win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And here is Fujinami on the cover wearing the big gold, as well as the IWGP. Once again, IWGP is 3 for 3 in title versus titles. Pretty cool. Fujinami would lose it to the Great Muta. Great Muta also was the Greatest 18 / martial arts champion at the time. This title would now be merged with the IWGP belt for the first time, but they're still carrying 2 separate belts. And you also see Masahiro Chono, who was the next NWA World Champion after Ric Flair surrendered the title. He won that in a tournament at the G1 Climax number 2 The winner of the G1 Climax would win the NWA World Title. We discussed all that stuff in the NWA Heavyweight Title video that I made earlier. The Great Muta, just trying to see if there was something behind here. Okay, the Great Muta would drop the title to Hashimoto. Hashimoto, he would hold it several times as well. I have him a couple of times with the belt, but he held it multiple times. Was a great champion, very beloved by the people. It's also got Ken Shamrock with the Pancrase heavyweight title, which was the Japanese MMA. It was almost like a shoot reel wrestling / MMA. You couldn't punch to the face. You could use open hands. Some of the matches were very physical. Some of the matches were questionable. They looked a little bit phony. A lot of people would say it was fake, but they were legit. Pancrase was legit. Was there any fake matches? Possibly. With the Japanese wrestlers that competed in it, there could have been. There was fake matches in the Pride Heavyweight Championship in Japan too, with wrestlers. Hickson Gracie versus Nahibu Takada was one of the fake matches that was set up for Gracie to win. Anyway, I digress. Back to the IWGP champion, and Hashimoto would become the champion. He would drop it again to Dragon Fujinami, getting tired of seeing Dragon. I'm showing this because the Greatest 18 title will go to Riki Choshu at that same night. There they are, both holding their titles up. And Choshu, at this point, this belt would dissolve and no longer be defended at this point on. And it would just be the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Later on, they would add an IWGP Junior Championship, but this would be the main title in New Japan. Okay, and then once again, we have Fujinami dropping the title. Just trying to see, Choshu, but not Choshu, Hashimoto. So I thought I had something else here, but I guess I don't have it. Okay, Hashimoto would take the title back from Fujinami. Here's a ticket stub to that event. Fujinami would become, on this separate night, the IWGP Tag Team Champion. So here's one of the last looks. I believe he holds it one more time. I'm not sure. I didn't want to show too many repeated people, but it seems to be going that way for some reason. Okay, this is he would lose the title to the Great Muta, which he would have a name change, no longer using the face paint. He would go by Keiji Muto. He would become the next IWGP champion, holding it for the second time. Notice he has the beard, no longer has the makeup on his face. He would shave the beard later on, but he would be the next IWGP champion. And here is a program of the G1 Climax. Muta would win this G1 Climax tournament, and he would be the first IWGP champion to win the G1 Climax as champion. So IWGP champion takes the G1 Climax, and he'd be the first one to do that. Not many people have done that. Up until this point, no one done it. He was the first, and I believe only 2 other people would do it until we got into like the 2000s. Muta's win would, let me move this back a little bit, or forward a little bit. He would set up a match. The size of this program is enormous. The Great Muta would would be challenged by the UWF champion, Nahibu Takada, who we mentioned earlier, who was a Pancrase and UWF wrestler. This would be a title versus title for the UWF. UWF was a shoot-style wrestling company. Very hard, very stiff, a lot of contact, a lot of submission, like MMA style. In the early years of MMA, I really enjoyed the UWF. They had several rebirths of it before it finally got swallowed up by New Japan, and that style would be the strong style in New Japan wrestling. So in this particular match, the Great Muta would retain the title, and the title wouldn't change hands. Here is Nahibu with the world belt of the UWF, which was the first NWA heavyweight championship belt held by Luthez. Luthez gave his belt to the winner of the UWF as they crowned their champions, and this was also discussed in another NWA video about the heavyweight championships when Luthez kept the belt and traveled throughout the world, still going as the champion, even though he wasn't. Here is the belt that he had in the 50s, and that would be to the title winner of the UWF. Eventually, they would have a rematch versus the Great Muta, or KG Muto, as he's going by now, and he would win the title. So now we would have Nahibu Takada as the new IWGP heavyweight champion. He would defeat the Great Muta, KG Muto, and he would hold the IWGP and UWF heavyweight title. So this will be the fourth time the title was changed and defended in a title versus title. Inoki would take over the company of the UWF, and that title would merge with the IWGP. So UWF is no longer, it would stay around for maybe another year or so eventually, but the title would just be the IWGP title. There would be no other champions, and the title would merge, like I said, with the IWGP, and Nahibu Takada would hold that title. Oh boy, he lost it again to Hashimoto. Here's Hashimoto winning the title back to Antonio Inoki, presenting him the belt in the ring. This will be his, I believe it's final time as champion. Here is your last look at Hashimoto with the title posing on the cover of New Japan Pro Wrestling Magazine. This is the last time we're going to see this style, the round plate. It'll go to more like a crown title, which was the least liked of all the belts, of all 5 versions of the IWGP belt. But nevertheless, the title would change. It would go to the Power Warrior. He was known as the Power Warrior, Suzuki Kansaki. I'll just call him the Power Warrior to keep it simple. He was the champion in the Hellraisers with Road Warrior Hawk. And then it would be a three-way tag team with Power Warrior, Hawk, and Animal. After Hawk had passed away, he teamed back up again with Road Warrior Animal as, they weren't the Hellraisers, what were they? It was the Hellraisers. Jeez, I can't remember the name they went by. Anyway, they teamed up in Japan, and they won actually the Mexican heavyweight tag team championship with Animal together. So Power Warrior would hold the title multiple times. I'm not going to show him many more times with the belt. He repeats it at least 4 more times. He would drop the title to Masahiro Chono. Chono would take the title, and I'm showing this cover with him. Another huge cover. This is also another G1 Climax tournament, and he would win the G1 Climax as the champion, as did KG Muto, or the Great Muta, some years before. This is a ticket stub to that event in '98, and Masahiro Chono would finally win the IWGP Championship. It took him a long time. He was a huge name there, and I'm surprised he did not get this IWGP belt sooner. He would lose it again to Scotty Norton. Scotty Norton would become the second American to hold that title. Here's Scotty with a cover. This is during the NWO years in '99 and '98. He would defend this title he held it several times, I believe twice, maybe 3. He would lose it to Muta, not on this night. Is it? Yeah, this is actually the program that Muta wins the title back. So Scotty Norton has the title, and the Great Muta takes it. KG Muto, I should call him, because that's his name now. And you'll notice this is his first time holding the crown type style to the heavyweight title. Scotty Norton would take the title back, and this is autographed by Scotty. I met him at a show years ago. Okay, we're coming up towards the end here somewhere. The title, again, there would be no more unique champions. It would go to Muto. I believe it would go to Norton again. It would go to the Power Warrior again, back and forth several times to the next unique champion in 2001, which would go to Fujita, who was a professional wrestler. Fujita was also a Pride mixed martial arts heavyweight fighter who came within an eyelash of knocking out Fedor Emelianenko, the Pride heavyweight champion, which would have been the upset of the centuries. I can't believe it. He came so close to knocking the champion out when Fujita was an extreme underdog. After the match, Inoki presented him with the old style IWGP belt, and you'll see the old belt here. He's carrying it, even though he's not the IWGP champion. But he would present that when he fought mixed martial arts, bringing the credibility back. Inoki's way of saying, my men are real fighters. They're legit badasses, and they compete, on a world-class stage, fighting real fighters and not just, wrestlers like All Japan or Noah would have. Our guys are real fighters, and, here is our title, and we defend it everywhere. So he would wear that to the Pride ring, which I thought was pretty cool. And then eventually, of course, he would take the title, beating, I'm not sure, I believe he beat Norton, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he beat Scotty Norton. I know they wrestled each other. I just don't remember if that was the night he won it or not. I'm going to say yes, it was Scotty Norton that he beat for the title. And so now he would carry both titles around with him for a short time. After a few months, it would go back to just carrying the one style belt, which was the crown. That's also getting ready to change. The title would go around a little bit more, unless I'm in the correct order. Yasuda, if I can say his name correctly, Yasuda. And look what you notice here. The NWF title is back. Takayama would become the NWF champion. Inoki would bring that title back out, had several matches in a small tournament to crown another NWF champion. He brought the title out of retirement, and Takayama would take the title in this title versus title, NWF versus IWGP title, and champion versus champion. Yasuda would lose it to Takayama. This is a program from the Fighting Spirit 2000, the night he had won the belt back. And he would carry that title for, he would have both belts, using both belts at the time. He would drop it to Nakamura. I know he came to the States. I believe he's with McMahon now. I'm not 100% sure. I don't watch it. I know he came to America. But you see him on the cover with both NWF and the Crown-style IWGP belt. This is also just another commemorative magazine from the first 32 years of the IWGP and New Japan's history. In a commemorative magazine. It's an expensive magazine. It's a good magazine for history and following the different champions. Okay, so we would go, I know Nagata would take the title. He was never on a cover with the belt. Several guys would repeat again. Bob Sapp would take the title. He was never on a cover with the magazine. It would change hands to multiple people who've already had the title again. So the next unique champion, not having Bob Sapp on the cover, who was also a Pride fighter, would go to Kojima. Kojima was the All Japan heavyweight champion, Triple Crown. All Japan's title was a Triple Crown. You won 3 belts, so take this one out. And it's these 3 titles, which I can explain. It's a long history to explain that too. So this was basically, he held the All Japan Triple Crown and the New Japan IWGP title at the same time. That would be the equivalent of Bob Backlund winning the NWA title from Harley Race and holding NWA and WWF titles in 1980. It was a big deal, and first time that's ever been done. So this was a really cool magazine cover showing the first time the 2 titles would merge to one company, have one champion, and of course that would dissolve later on. And Kojima would hold the title a couple of times. There wouldn't be another unique champion again until Brock Lesnar on the bottom, and Brock is on the bottom getting presented the title from Antonio Inoki, and now we have a title change. This gets really crazy. Kurt Angle would take the title. Inoki would form his own company and call it the Inoki Wrestling Federation or whatever it was. The IWGP would continue on a different direction, and that's where we're going to stay. So we're going to ignore what Brock Lesnar did. He was the champion for about a year. He kept the title. He defended it. Then things got kind of screwy later on, and went his own way with Inoki after their falling out. It was set up to have a match with Tanahashi. This is a program, Turbulence, I believe it was called, if I remember correctly. And it was going to crown the champion. Brock went back to the States and surrendered the title, and that match never happened. And Tanahashi would become the next world champion, and he would become, besides the Great Muta, one of my favorite wrestlers from Japan, or of all time for that matter, out of the Japanese wrestlers for sure. And because he took that title with him, the belt, you can see, the style that it changed to, which would be version 3. They had to go back to the original, not the original, but version 2, and it's the crown look. This is a very rare shot of Tanahashi with this style belt, because he did not have it long. And to find him on a cover with this belt it's pretty rare, because it would go to the version 4, which was my favorite, and here is Tanahashi with that style version 4 of the belt. He's also on the cover with the new Triple Crown champion from All Japan, and Pro Wrestling Noah's heavyweight champion. So all 3 champions on the cover, kind of like the throwback after Stanley Weston magazines back in the day, where they would have all 3 titles from 3 different champions, and that's something you just never see anymore, and it's a shame. So I've always enjoyed seeing that. The Japanese magazines always do it right with their champions. They always put them on a stage and show them off with some great magazine covers. He would drop the title. Tanahashi would drop it to the Great Muta. Great Muta actually trained Tanahashi. He was one of his proteges, and he would take the title. This would be Keiji Muta's last time as the IWGP champion. He's also here with the Power Warrior with a haircut, and he is the Pro Wrestling Noah heavyweight champion, and this is in 2009. So I'm going to stop the video here. I try to keep these videos kind of small. This one got crazy, but there's a lot of history from the NWF and the merger with the WCCW and the merger with the NWF belt, and the merger with the different styles from the different wrestlers that came in, and it just gets kind of crazy and mind-boggling after a while. Really hard to follow it. Putting it in perspective with a magazine cover and showing the date and the wrestler and the style belt of that time period is a challenge, and especially because none of this is in English, and it's very hard to figure out. So luckily I'm a long-time martial artist. I can speak Japanese, not fluently, but I can speak it decently. I can't read it, but I can speak it, and I was able to translate a lot of it through the help of Google Translate, and some of the words that I was able to know already, and figure out the history behind this IWGP and all the title merges throughout the years. So I'll probably pick this up from 2009 and bring it to 2022 at a later date. Here is the early history of New Japan IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked it.